Welcome to Public Comment. I'm John Dunbar, former mayor of Yountville.
And I'm Alfredo Pedroza, former Napa County supervisor.
This is where we're going to talk about politics, people, and whatever else is on our mind.
We can't let the perfect get in the way of progress. We have to challenge our industries. Step up.
Because there is so much commonality, when you get away from the bullshit arguing.
What is it that we need to do to sustain the success?
So, Alfredo, what is on our agenda today?
Well, John, I think today we should talk about the lack of vision for Napa County. I think it's something that we've all been flirting with. We've all talked about it. And it's unique because you and I have been in public office. We can talk about the general plan, but I really think what is hurting Napa the most is that we don't have a clear vision for where we're going.
And how to prioritize where we want to go. I think that's one of the challenges that we're looking at right now. And it's made more difficult because there's so much polarization right now. There's this zero sum that for me to be right, you have to be wrong. And that's not any way to help navigate going forward.
I think in a previous podcast, I mentioned, being in the car and looking at the windshield or the rearview mirror. And I think this community has been saddled with looking in the rearview mirror. We talk about the ag preserve like it happened yesterday. It didn't. It happened many years ago. And I think we're failing to own the responsibility of creating the next Napa Valley. And we allow these special interest groups to go create a vision, which is not a vision because it's a stop growth vision, which you and I have talked about in the previous episode. But what I really think we have to own is that the next Napa is right before us. And we're not talking about it. And we point to, we need a general plan update. We need general plans. The public doesn't understand that. They're looking at, I want to raise a family here. I want to retire here. I want to live well here. What are you doing about it? And we're letting them, the anti-growthers, in my opinion, say that this is not a good community to live in, when in fact, I think it's a pretty special place.
Well, let me give some context. I'm glad you mentioned the general plan, partly because you have notes in front of you that talk about it.
And I think the general plan is boring, by the way, but go ahead.
Well, a lot of government is boring, but it's also critical.
But we're out of it now, so we can say that.
So I'll just read some of the bullet points right off the Napa County website about the general plan. And it was meant to be a long-term plan, 20-year plan. That's typically what it is. Costs sometimes multi-millions of dollars to do. Takes a long time. The current plan for the county is over 400 pages. And you mentioned the Ag Preserve from 1968. We'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second. But just to give some high-level talking points about the general plan and what its intention is.
All right, you made me start drinking already.
You should start drinking now. You might have to pour some more. Direct housing and commercial enterprises. I'm just using some of the keywords. Protect agriculture, watershed, and open space lands. Provide for additional workforce and affordable housing. Preserve the county's irreplaceable biodiversity. Preserve the county's cultural and historic resources. Provide transportation policies. Describe a network of bike routes and recreational trails. Reduce local contributions to global climate change and encourage sustainability. And one that I think is also very important that seems to be one of the most divisive is protecting the economic viability of agriculture as critical to the county's future. And so these are kind of the starting points, the subjects that really need to be talked about and talked about in a fair and respectful way. That's what I'm worried about is as we're going into 2025 and the county is planning on updating its general plan, that we're not taking sides and we're not just following individual agendas. This needs to be a collaboration with good intentions.
And look, I appreciate all those bullet points.
And now I'm going to drink after that.
You should, right? Because you had to read that. But, as a Napa resident, I hear those bullet points, but it's like, what does it mean to them? And I think we have to acknowledge that, in the 90s and the early 2000s, this community was growing and people were winning. People were benefiting from it. And, I use my own family. They came from a foreign country, right? And they were farm workers. And they bought a house in 1992, right? And I still remember driving with my dad at night to see how the neighborhood, if it was safe. It was in North fucking Napa Valley. Like, It's going to be safe. We're growing up in Lincoln apartments. Like, how much more do you need to know? But the pride that my dad was taking and my mom because they were buying a home, right? The value of home ownership. And people cared about that. And you saw a lot of people benefit from working in our core industries, and people were doing well. And I still think people are doing well right now, but it's harder. It's harder to live in Napa. It's harder to put your kids through schools. It's harder to have your kids move back. And I think those are the pressure points that people are facing. But Napa's changing. What the struggle I have with is, we act surprised that we're a tourism economy. We act surprised that we're an ag economy. We intended to be that. We knew we were doing that. And people are benefiting from being a tourism economy, from being an ag economy. The highest and best use of our land is agriculture. It says it at the county of Napa, and you're questioning it now. So I think that's part of what we have to be honest with, of saying, we knew we were going to create this community. Now, what we do have to have a self-reflection moment on is the community coming along with it? Are people benefiting from it? And I think that's where we're not being honest with ourselves, of saying, okay, what does the next ag preserve look like? And how does tourism continue to thrive in our community? Because guess what? It needs to. We need to make sure our hotels are healthy. We need to make sure that our restaurants are healthy. I went to 2 of them today, right, for 2 lunches because I double booked, which is normal for me. But we need to make sure that we have a healthy community.
I think we need to recognize, and again, I'm going to keep coming back to doing it honestly and fairly and collaboratively, going back to the origins of the valley. Even the 1800s, there were grapes, there were people producing wine, but it really became an international wine destination back, let's say the 60s, 70s. But there was the intention of protecting agriculture and the natural lands of Napa County. We have done that. One of the things that Napa Valley Vintners has done for years is show the comparison between Napa County and Santa Clara County.
And let's give them a shout out. I think they've done a great job at that.
Santa Clara County made a choice. They went a very different direction. They became Silicon Valley. They don't have trees. Now they have concrete, but they chose to live a different future. And some people, I'm sure, miss the old Santa Clara. But what I like to use the term evolution versus change, because what I believe that evolution represents protecting and recognizing the heritage of our valley, but building from that foundation. And I think some people feel anything different is bad.
Yeah, but look, I think when you look at the relationship that the county has with their cities, we're unique, right? Where this county, including our cities and town, made a deal that the intense uses, the restaurants, they were not going to go out in the county, right? And what I mean by that, to be very specific, when you go to a winery, you're tasting wine. You may have some food and wine pairings and a little bit more, but it's not a restaurant. And you and I have been to wineries in surrounding communities where it's a full-on restaurant. We're not that in Napa County. Now, some wineries would probably want to be that, but we said no to that. We also said no to wineries being hotels. And in some communities, you can go to a winery, stay there, and eat there. We're not doing that because we want those uses in our cities where we have thriving restaurants. And you and I have been to many of those. That's the balance, and that's the vision that we had, where we had thriving cities in a town, in a county that was more rural and protected for agriculture. But we need to allow wineries to continue to be successful, because no one is going to keep investing in a business that doesn't make money or have an ability to make money. And we have to keep that front and center.
Here's one of the ironies that I think, to your point about the ag preserve and the protection that we set up and continue to preserve, is when you look in the hills, you don't see thousands of wineries.
No.
You see thousands of homes in some cases, or hundreds of homes. And what's ironic is, in some cases, too many cases, in my opinion, it's the people that are living in the hills that are now complaining about development in the hills. It's like, are you kidding me? And it's not just about wineries, because now the argument is traffic impacts, wildfire risk, things like that. Maybe it's the dozens of homes along a narrow, windy rural road that has that risk already in place. And now you're choosing that I've got mine. You're not going to have yours.
That we already hit on NIMBYism, and we might need to do that episode again. But look, I think you're hitting, this equilibrium that we're trying to keep, right? Of how do you allow investment to come in, whether you want to live here. And look, if you've made buku money somewhere else and you want to come build a mansion and you want to do it in Napa Valley, power to you. You've done something in life that allows you to do that. Who are we to say no? As long as you're playing by our rules, I think that's America. That's the dream. Just like for my parents, it was crossing the border and putting their kids through American schools. Different dreams and different skills. But that's what makes, I think, America, America. And I hate to sound so patriotic, but that's what it is. But I think for us, though, we need to acknowledge that we need to pivot. We are an ag county. We are a tourism economy. But how do we sustain that? And we need to acknowledge that businesses need to evolve. And right now, right, some of the people that are fighting these business applications and these business proposals, and if you ask them, okay, if we say no to that, what are you going to get? And they think like, well, it's going to go back to what it was yesterday. So you think yesterday was better than today? I don't think that's true.
No, I would hear people talk about Yountville in similar ways where it's like, we liked it better when. It's like, really? Because I know one of my best friends has lived there for over 30 years. I moved there in 1998. I'm a newbie. I only lived there for 25 years. But
I won't tell you where I was in 1998 because it's going to age me, but go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you're still wearing a diaper or not. But that's up to you.
Whoa.
But by the way, I can't let go. You said buku. I haven't heard that in a long time, but I don't want to get off my point, which is people that complain about the changes in Yountville over the years. I was on the council for 18 years, and there was a lot of evolution, I will say, in that very small town. First of all, the town started off as a bunch of bars that supported the veterans at the vets home, and it grew. And then it became some housing, and they added some restaurants. And we have the great fortune of having Chef Thomas Keller and his whole team. And then others came in. We had Michael Chiarello help make a difference there.
Rest in peace.
And absolutely. I remember when he came down from St. Helena and he said, I want to open a restaurant here because, frankly, he said St. Helena is the city of no and Yountville is the town of yes. But with those yeses came an evolution of the town. And there are some people that's like, I liked it better way back when there was nobody here. But getting back to my friend Joe T, he was here to know the families that used to be the founding families, many of whom helped build up that community. We've seen it in every one of our communities that, it used to be Calistoga was horse and buggy and, the Wild West, and they've evolved. St. Helena's evolved. Everyone has.
But I hear that, right? But I think one thing is to point to the plans that we pass as government that are the guardrails to where we're going as a community. I think the other part is we have to challenge our industries. We have to challenge wine and ag to say, you know what? Step up. What is the next Napa going to be like in ag? Is it more biodynamic farming? Is it more farm to table, right? Is it more modifications where people can taste wine in the vineyards because that's what people want? Is it them getting to meet the farmer, the winemaker? Is it, hotels that are more green? What is it that we need to do to sustain the success? And we can't keep pointing to the ag preserve as the Bible. We read it, we did it, create a new chapter. And I think we're falling to that fatigue. And it's not government's job to solve it all the time. I do think we need a healthy challenge to the industries to help craft the next vision. And I know it's hard because what I've heard when I've said that to people, because I'm not saying anything I haven't said to people, back then it was different because you didn't have that many people around the table to create a vision. Well, guess what? You and I have been legislating with a lot of people around the fucking table, and we've done it. So everyone has to step up now and say, you know what? We're going to make some people uncomfortable, but we know that Napa needs to evolve this way, right? And bring people with you, right? Because that's one thing that I remember, not that we want to talk about people that have passed, but Steve Molds was a compass for me. right? A man of great centerness. And he said Napa needs to keep going forward. And I think we're losing that because we're fighting these little fights versus acknowledging we're not going to shut down. We should not be shutting down the wine industry. We should not be shutting down the tourism industry. We should not be shutting the restaurant industry. But we need to work with it and make sure that they're responsible business, entities, that they're contributing to society, that they're creating good jobs and people good wages. We need to do all that. And they are by and large. But then how are we allowing it to grow and modify and evolve so they remain competitive?
I'm going to look back. It's now almost 10 years since the Agricultural Protection Advisory Committee was formed that involved winery representatives, environmental representatives, elected officials, community leaders. And we met for a year and a half.
Yeah.
I was the vice chair of that with Ted Hall as the chair.
I'm sorry.
He did an excellent job running those meetings. And we had basically kind of what has become the two sides. And it's really unfortunate that they're considered by some as being adversaries because there is so much commonality. When you get away from the bullshit arguing, there's a lot of commonality about protecting agriculture and the land. But we spent over a year and a half to agree only on a blank Excel spreadsheet that didn't even have titles in the rows and columns because as we started talking about compromise, both sides went to their corners.
Yeah, but as someone that created that,
yeah, thank you.
We kind of knew that was going to be an exercise.
Well,
maybe,
but I didn't believe it.
Okay.
I was committed to it, and I felt like there was a way forward, and it blew up because people weren't willing to consider the other side.
But it was a release valve for the tension that we were all feeling, right? And to be fair, I think we had the right intention when we created that committee, but we quickly realized that no one wanted to let their guard down. And I think we can't let the perfect get in the way of progress because when people made the deal of the Ag Preserve, it pissed a lot of people off. And I think we're living in a moment, cancel culture, where what if you're a business that believes something different? Are you going to get canceled? And I think that's legit. People may question that. So why would they stick their neck out? Or if you're an industry group, are you going to lose membership? Like that's what people are facing today, right? So it's hard for them to stick their neck out, right? Because of the moment we're in. But I think if we really want to be leaders and trailblazers like, they were in the past, you have to take that risk. And I can tell you from personal experience, as someone that's had targets on the front and the back, it's worth it because it's progress. And I think it just can't be government though. And I think too much of the time people were expecting government to solve the problem. I don't think this is government's job to solve it entirely. I think our industries have to do a better job. And I mean the principles that are invested in this community that care, and I know they care, of leaning in to this and saying, here's how we think Napa should grow. Doesn't mean that just because I say it, it's going to get done, but they're putting it on the table so we can consider it and putting it into the blender of solutions.
But I think what's key to that whole thing, that whole process, is respecting those that have a different vision. And it doesn't mean that they're right or wrong and you're right or wrong. There needs to be a willingness to allow some of all of it. So if you are a property owner that wants to plant a vineyard that is absolutely permitted today or is zoned for a winery, in my opinion, while those are the rules and you are complying with those rules, there needs to be fair and balanced consideration for that. If you are trying to go outside those rules and do something that doesn't fit that long-term vision that we all have for the valley, then maybe you shouldn't be allowed to do it. But right now, there are tools that are weaponizing either slow growth or no growth, and we are having these clashes of property rights versus property protection, environmental protection. They should be working in synergy, and in some cases, people are willing to allow that to happen. In other cases, again, it goes back to, no, we need 100% of what I want, or else I'm going to oppose anything you want.
But it goes back to, I think what you said right now is it's okay to disagree, but I haven't heard a compelling vision from the other side. And I mean the other side, some of these groups have been fighting, the business side of the equation. It's saying no. And when you challenge, it's like, okay, let's peel the onion. So what elements of this community do you want to restore back? And there's none. And I think that's part of the challenge. It's like, then you're just saying no because you want it to stop and freeze. That's not realistic. Now, I also think that it shouldn't be the wild, wild west where you can do whatever you want. There's a policy in the general plan, as you said, that makes Napa special. And there's a reason why our brand is known around the world. There's a reason why people want to live here, most people, right? It's because it's a special place. But that's not guaranteed either, right? Napa's not going to be a jewel forever. It takes intentional work. And right now, I think we're not firing on all cylinders where you're having some misfires. And it's happening across the board. And I think that's kind of the wake up call that I'm seeing in terms of this lack of vision, because all of these discussions of Vision 2050 or slow growth or the coalitions coming together, it's all a causation of this community being thirsty for a new vision.
I'll disagree with only one small part of what you just said is about it can't stay a jewel forever. I do think if people are willing to compromise on the future as a community needs to collectively, I do think it can be a jewel forever because there is a uniqueness to this valley that has been preserved agriculturally, economically, with the people that
Yeah.
live here. Uh, it all started with people working together.
Yeah.
Granted, the ag preserve, very divisive. I remember hearing stories about families in Yountville disagreeing and could not even speak to each other for a long time because it was, as families can do, they just have different opinions. It worked out to our great
Yeah.
benefit. And most of the folks that were responsible for that hard work, I hope they're proud of what they did. But we aren't seeing that kind of really strong leadership right now, not only just in electeds, but with community leaders that are representing certain interests need to be strong enough to open their minds to other ideas. And that's where I don't see their individual visions being willing to compromise with others.
Yeah.
I hope that changes.
Look, I think we're saying the same thing. This community can be a jewel, but it takes purpose and it takes work, right? No different than a relationship back home. But I think we have to make sure that we're working at the same goal. I think right now the goal's fuzzy in terms of what people want because I don't think everyone's being honest with what they want, right? So, like, I think the call to action, right? And I think what we can end with is for those that are investing here, those that have assets here, those on the business side, don't wait for others to do it and don't expect others to do it. Lean in and do it. And I know it's risky because in the days of social media and the days of hostility, it can be bad for business. But can it get any worse than what we're doing now?
Well,
right?
you mentioned social media. That's what I think has really changed the narrative is you have people sitting at home that are just taking shots and not being reasonable with the facts. And they're stirring up shit just to stir it up. And that's not helping any. That's where it takes that strong leadership to stay away from the noise and stay focused on the collaboration and creating a new vision.
Yeah. Well, look, I think for the first time, there's a platform, which may be this public comment podcast, that's calling a spade, right? And we're being honest, right? So I've challenged the business community, right, to step up. I also want to challenge those that have been on the sidelines, complaining about it. Why don't you be part of it? Right? You have the general plan. Be mature enough and put your vision on the table of what you want. And if it's saying, I want Napa to be like what it was in 1970, then have the confidence to say that's what you want. But don't hide behind fighting projects. Own it. Because I think that's going to make a better public discourse when people are putting their agendas on the table. So enough of the cute little, public comment blasts that you do or next door posts because you talked about social media. Enough. Let's own the opportunity we have. And I do think we can make it better if we all lean into it.
We toasted it in a previous episode to the general plan, which I think is maybe the first time in the history
I'm not doing that.
of general plans. No, what I will ask is let's toast to having a unified, collaborative vision for the future of Napa Valley.
Cheers.
All right, John, we have another episode under our belt. We talked about vision. How are you feeling about it?
I think it's an important conversation. I'm glad we had it. We have to be willing to acknowledge that there are some challenges, some flaws even in what's happening today. But I hope that we inspire people to have an honest, candid conversation going forward.
I think we did that today. And I'll just say, I'm tired of the grandstanding. I'm tired of the pretending that things are okay. They're not. And we got to make sure that we're stepping into the solutions and being part of it and owning the fact that we have an incredible community here.
I think it's a really exciting time, actually, because we are taking this time and really taking our challenges head on. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's also important that people reach out to us and let them know what they think about what we're talking about.
How can they do that?
They can do that, I'm glad you asked, by going to publiccommentnapa@gmail.com. And we look forward probably even reading some of those emails on our podcast.
I won't.